Some of the things Puerto Ricans repeat the most about Puerto Rico are either incomplete, exaggerated, or just flat out wrong. No, Americans did not invent the name Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico technically has no lakes. And that jíbaro outfit most of us wore in elementary school? Yeah, we need to talk about that. Today, we're diving into 7 things Puerto Ricans get wrong about Puerto Rico. And listen, before the comment section explodes, this episode isn't about attacking Puerto Rico. It's actually the opposite. Because sometimes what we inherit culturally isn't fake, just simplified. Hello everybody, welcome back to another great episode of Chronicles and Cocktails. I'm Josue, the spirited historian. And today, we're going to be discussing 7 things Puerto Ricans get wrong about Puerto Rico. Some of these things are historical misunderstandings, some are cultural simplifications, and some, honestly, are things we just kept repeating for so long that nobody stopped to question them. And stay tuned for the cocktail today, because it's delicious and refreshing. But before we continue, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you want to know when new episodes come out, click the bell button. That way YouTube alerts you whenever new episodes are released. And I release new episodes every Sunday, and sometimes on Wednesdays and on special date and occasions too. So like, subscribe, hit the bell button. And let's jump into Puerto Rican myths, misunderstandings, and cultural confusions. Let's start with one that honestly bothers me more than it probably should, the Puerto Rican pava. Because somewhere along the way, a lot of Puerto Ricans started confusing the traditional Puerto Rican pava with the Cuban guajiro hat. And they are not the same thing. Now yes, Puerto Rico and Cuba share deep Caribbean and Canary Island roots. Of course they do, but culturally, visually, they evolve differently. Puerto Rican pavas were traditionally woven from local palm fibers and tended to be smaller, tighter, more structured, practical, made for actual agricultural work. The Cuban guajiro hat, especially the dramatic wide brim version people recognize today, has a much broader and looser appearance than with hanging fibers around the edges. Very different silhouette. And this isn't just opinion. Historian Ovidio Davila has written specifically about this subject, including the differences between Puerto Rican palm species and Cuban jarrah palms. Even the materials were different. According to Davila, the Puerto Rican pava was associated with local palm species unique to Puerto Rico, while the Cuban hat tradition used jarrah palms associated with Cuba. Now, here's where this gets interesting. Over time, Puerto Rican jíbaro imagery started blending with broader Caribbean imagery, especially in tourism, commercial art, festival, and pop culture. So today, people see almost any straw hat and say, "Ah, eso es una pava." No, mijo, no, not exactly. And before anybody gets offended, this is not anti-Cuban. This is actually pro-history. Puerto Rico y Cuba son primos, not twins. And honestly, this became obvious to me the moment I started looking at actual historical photographs of Puerto Rican workers. You started noticing, wait a minute, the real Puerto Rican countryside didn't look exactly like the festival versions we inherited later. Even recently, Artists and celebrities, including Bad Bunny, have sometimes worn hats that visually align much more with the Cuban Guajiro tradition than the historical Puerto Rican pava. Again, not wrong, just different. And that leads us directly to the next one. Okay, this one might get me in trouble. Maybe not. The modern school jíbaro costume. I mean, really, really, really. Because if you grew up in Puerto Rico, especially around El Día de la Puertorriqueñidad or Festival de la Novilla, you probably saw this. White clothes, red neck scarf, red sash around the waist, and again, the wrong pava. Basically, looking like a Caribbean version of a cartoon peasant. And listen, I understand why it happened. Schools simplify culture. That's normal. It shouldn't happen, but it does. But when you look at the actual historical photographs of jíbaros, the reality was much more practical and honestly much more elegant. Working jíbaros usually wore practical shirts, sometimes white, sometimes striped, sometimes darker, fabrics depending on labor and region, and of course the heat, the sun. Pants were functional, often dark, often worn, sometimes rolled up. And when they cleaned up for church, town, dances, baptisms, or gatherings, they dressed up properly, nice shirts, proper trousers, sometimes a guayabera. The jíbaro was poor in many cases, but poor does not mean clown costume. That's something modern people sometimes forget, especially out in San Juan, Carolina, Bayamón, Guaynabo. And those red scarves and red waistbands that became common in school presentations, I mean, really? There's actually very little evidence that they represented widespread everyday jíbaro attire across Puerto Rico. A lot of what we inherited was theatrical folkloric simplification, especially during the 20th century when Puerto Rican identity became packaged into easy visual symbols. Again, not fake, simplified. And honestly, once you see the historical photographs side by side with the school versions, you can't unsee it. The real jíbaro looked like an actual human being, not a mascot. Okay, breathe. Quick one. Puerto Rico's official flower is the Flor de Maga. Gente, not the amapola hibiscus people constantly confuse it with. Now, to be fair, they are related. Both belong to the hibiscus family. So I understand the confusion. But the Flor de Maga, especially the native Puerto Rican varieties associated with our national identity, became culturally important because of its connection to the island's landscape and artistic traditions. Meanwhile, a lot of people casually use a red hibiscus flower interchangeably. I mean, I saw them on TV while they were doing the line for the Bad Bunny concert. Amapola, hibiscus, not the maga. Again, not the same thing. And yes, if you're Puerto Rican, at some point in your life, somebody probably drew the wrong flower on a school project and you didn't revise it to make it right. Now, this one is interesting because people get very emotional about it. The idea that Americans invented the name Puerto Rico. They didn't. Now, after 1898, the US government officially standardized the spelling Puerto Rico in many federal documents. I mean, that part, it's true. But variations of the name existed long before the American change of sovereignty. In fact, historical documents, maps, newspapers, and publications from different periods already showed multiple spellings and variations connected to pronunciation, translation, and anglicization. Eventually, in 1931, the official spelling reverted federally to Puerto Rico. In other words, the US Congress made the actual Puerto Rico the official name of Puerto Rico. But the important point here is this. History is messier than slogans. The idea that Americans simply woke up one day and invented the name from scratch? Not accurate. And of course, if you want the full deep dive on that topic, I actually have an entire episode on Puerto Rico because honestly, that rabbit hole gets crazy. Okay, deep breath. Because this one gets political fast. When the change of sovereignty happened in 1898, Puerto Rico was not legally functioning as a colony. Not a colony. And I will say it again. I mean, you gotta read. By that point, Puerto Rico had already received the Carta Autonómica of 1897. That charter granted Puerto Rico significant autonomous powers within the Spanish constitutional system. Puerto Rico had local government structures, representation, administrative autonomy, and provincial status within Spain. Within Spain. We were Spain. We were a province of Spain, not a colony. And you can go back before 1897 and you can see the actual document stating also that before then, they referred to Puerto Rico as the province of Puerto Rico. The only difference was in 1897, it became an autonomous province with more autonomy. Actually, the official name was La Provincia Autónoma de Ultramar de Puerto Rico. So, yeah, it's easy to repeat. And it's easy to repeat when, friendly voices keep saying things over and over, hoping that if you repeat it a lot, it becomes true. All you gotta do is look at documents. Now, obviously, there are debates about how much autonomy actually existed in practice, and that's fair, but autonomy is not independence. And historically speaking, saying Puerto Rico in 1898 functioned exactly the same as a colony is simply inaccurate. The island's political status evolved over time. And this is exactly why history matters, because people often compress words and phrases and compress 400 years before that into that one sentence. Okay, let's tone it down. Puerto Rico has no lakes. No hay lagos en Puerto Rico. What most people call lakes, like Lago Dos Bocas or Lago Caunillas or Lago Carraizo, are actually reservoirs. There's a difference. A natural lake forms naturally. A reservoir is man-made, usually created by damming rivers, which is what happened in Puerto Rico. Now, before somebody says, okay, but look, they look like lakes, oh my God. Yes, of course they do. But geographically and scientifically, they are reservoirs. And honestly, this is one of my favorite Puerto Rican facts because people get irrationally upset about it. You tell somebody Puerto Rico has no lakes, and immediately they become hydrologists. Like suddenly everybody works for National Geographic. Okay, last one. And this one might be the most important. The phrase Boricua de pura cepa. There is no such thing as Boricua de pura cepa. Now, culturally, I understand exactly what people mean. they mean fully Puerto Rican, proud Puerto Rican, deeply Puerto Rican. But scientifically, Puerto Ricans are one of the most mixed populations in the Americas. I mean, you got Spanish, Canarian, Corsican, African, Taino, Irish, French, Catalan, Middle Eastern, Italian, German, and later, American influence too. Puerto Rican identity is literally built from mixture. And honestly, that's part of what makes Puerto Rico fascinating. There is no single Puerto Rican face, no single Puerto Rican DNA profile, no single Puerto Rican appearance. That's why you can have two Puerto Ricans from the same town who look completely different genetically. Matter of fact, you can have them from the same mother and father. And if you've ever taken one of those DNA tests, you already know half of Puerto Rico thought they were 100% Spanish or 100% Taino until the results arrived. Suddenly, wait, what? Where did Sicily come from? Where did French come from? Puerto Rico is a mixture. That is Puerto Rican history. Not despite the mixture, but because of it. And I'm going to leave the link below so you can get that DNA test from Ancestry and prove me wrong. Because Boricua de pura cepa? No. We're all mixed. And if you have something against the Spanish, guess what? You are. And if you have something against the Taino, guess what? You are too. But you are also African, European, all these kinds of stuff. You can see my episode on my DNA test. Go check yours. The link is below. So no, this episode wasn't about attacking Puerto Rico. Honestly, the deeper I study Puerto Rican history, the more interesting Puerto Rico becomes. Because the real history is usually more complicated than the simplified versions we inherit. And personally, I think that complexity is beautiful. Puerto Rico is not simple. It never was, and it isn't. And maybe that's exactly why we keep talking about it. Now, I already know the comment sections is going to be civil, completely peaceful, obviously. So tell me, what's another thing Puerto Ricans constantly get wrong about Puerto Rico? And if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to Chronicles and Cocktails for more Puerto Rican history, culture, identity, cocktails, and stories that connect them all. So, thank you for watching. I'm glad you spent this time with me. Don't forget to subscribe and go watch all the other episodes. We have a lot of episodes. 60, I think this is number 69. There's a lot of material. Enjoy your week. Have fun. Get smart. Read a lot. Be nice. And thank you for watching. I'm Josue, the Spirited Historian. I'll see you on the next episode. Salud.